COMT. COMT stands for catecholamine methyltransferase. COMT helps break down dopamine, and to some degree is involved in making it. Much of the population has a genetic polymorphism that makes it difficult to make and then break down dopamine. It manifests as a difficulty in finding a reward level of dopamine, and then when they do get it, they have a hard time breaking it down and can turn manic. Sounds like bipolar, right? COMT impairments are often found in persons who crave stimulation and therefore stimulants, and people who have been diagnosed bipolar and schizoaffective. Reactive hypoglycemia. What looks like bipolar, schizoaffective, or a mood disorder can also be attributed to blood sugar issues. There is a type of hypoglycemia that often defies detection: reactive hypoglycemia. We will look at a graph to describe this phenomenon. The vertical line is the blood sugar level, and the horizontal line is the number of hours. The beginning here is a normal fasting level blood sugar upon waking. Most people think that this fasting blood sugar is how you determine hypoglycemia. Rarely do you find hypoglycemia on a fasting level. The real test is a glucose tolerance test, where a person drinks a thick, sugary liquid and the blood sugar is plotted over a 5-hour period. When a reactive hypoglycemic eats a sugary meal, the blood sugar rises as it should. Then, an overwhelming amount of insulin is released by the pancreas. The excessive insulin release actually drops the blood sugar level down below the fasting level. And then the person becomes hypoglycemic for a few hours and then comes back to the fasting level. This situation would be better named hyperinsulinism, as that is what is occurring. Keep in mind, coffee can be a setup for this mechanism. As this situation progresses, it often turns diabetic. In the early days of ATMC, we did 200 glucose tolerance tests on our population and found that 70% were reactive hypoglycemic. You could reasonably assume that in 70% of mental health hospital admits, blood sugar is at least partly a component. Sugar acts like a drug in your system and should be used sparingly. Endorphin-opiate connection. Endorphins are the body's natural painkillers. Our bodies can produce what is essentially morphine. Opiate drugs take the place of this natural neurochemistry, and long-term use of opiates will shut off the natural production. Then, when a person comes off the opiates, there is nothing to block the pain, and even the slightest touch or even digestion can register as extreme pain. This is one reason why these drugs are so addictive, because coming off of them hurts. This is what endorphins look like at the synapse. A pain impulse comes down the pipe, and endorphins are released to soften the amount of pain that is felt. In this example, the stimulus is a soft touch to the arm. Without endorphins, this touch might register as pain. Opiates do the same thing as endorphins. What happens, however, is that the receptors, over time, downregulate to the drug because the body perceives pain as its friend, saving the body from damage. It then takes more and more of the drug in order to achieve a pain-limiting response. The way to relieve this conundrum is twofold. We taper the amount of drug while building up the neurochemistry with endorphin precursors. This makes it so that the neurochemistry can adapt to the shift, and the person is relieved from experiencing ridiculous amounts of pain. This preloading with endorphin-building amino acids and tapering process can be usually achieved in about 2 to 4 weeks. Suboxone is sometimes used as an intermediary. Chronic pain situations can also exhaust endorphins, as the body is trying to continually keep up with a dampening pain response. Allergen foods can also exhaust endorphins. When an allergic response is triggered, there is inflammation. The body tries to dampen the pain from the inflammation using endorphins. People can get addicted to allergen foods because they get addicted to the endorphin release. This is termed allergic addicted. People who have exhausted their endorphins will often crave opiates and inflammatory foods. Endorphins also block emotional pain, or specifically, the amount of emotion we pick up from other people. Our emotional brain is called our limbic brain. All mammals have this limbic brain, including our dogs and cats. It is normal and natural to be able to sense someone's emotions from a distance. It is this ability that allows us to avoid threats and be drawn towards bonding experiences that increase our chances of survival. We can tell if the person in the car next to us has road rage, and that can trigger an anger response in us. We have a whole different feeling if they're attracted to us and are trying to get our phone number. We can feel if a person is anxious, bored, excited, mad, or sad. If someone is low in endorphins, they tend to overfeel people, which can be very uncomfortable. Lower endorphin people can feel others more. It can be a wonderful gift in many ways. Some of our best artists are geared this way. They can feel the emotions of others and can resonate with it in an often amazing way. Though once famous, the continual feeling of everyone putting attention on them can grind them down, spending what little endorphins they have. Often, these folks turn to painkillers and sedatives to cope, as in the cases of Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston. the world can be unkind to these beautiful spirits. They are exactly the kind of persons who have difficulty managing all of the attention. Extreme emotional trauma, especially prolonged threats, can burn out endorphins too. When someone is in a war situation or is at threat of being traumatized, it is natural for the neurochemistry to want to perceive threats faster so as to avoid getting killed. So an adaptive mechanism to ongoing threats is to lower the endorphins so that a person can feel what is going on around them more. The lowered endorphins allow for this, but over time, a person begins to feel threats even when there are none. This is a possible contributing mechanism behind PTSD. PTSD has been shown at our clinic to respond favorably to endorphin repair. There is a genetic disposition for low endorphins. Those who have the A1 allele on the D2 dopamine receptor of the 11th chromosome do not transmit endorphins as well. And so basically, they are low endorphin and may have an addictive biochemistry that drives them towards opiates. Cutting is also a sign of low endorphins, as the pain causes a release of endorphins and helps provide an emotional distance from whatever that person is feeling. The hallmark of low endorphins is extreme emotional sensitivity, specifically the inability to block others' emotions. A diet low in protein and high in sugar can also debilitate someone into a low endorphin state, as can emotional trauma. High arsenic levels have also appeared very frequently in those with pain and sensitivity issues. Classic tell signs of endorphin deficiency. Overfeels others' emotions to the point of frequent discomfort. Chronic pain. Cutting. Opiate addiction. To address endorphin deficient issues, supplements. Endorphin packs by New Pathways and NAC. Toxic impairment. Clear up arsenic using NAC. Stop smoking if possible. Cigarettes contain arsenic. Persons smoking are 3 to 4 times as likely to relapse on opiates, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Diet. Eliminate sugar and caffeine. Include protein-based foods. Sugar poisons endorphins and proteins build them. If vegan, include as heavy of vegan proteins as you can and limit light foods like fruits. Remove foods that the person shows an addictive tendency towards. Environment. Increase physical activity, specifically weightlifting. Muscle building exercises break down muscle tissue in order to expand. This releases endorphins, which is a good thing. Remove oneself from emotionally charged living situations or at work. Repeated insults to one's emotional stability can thwart endorphin building efforts. If coming off of opiates, consider switching to Suboxone. Induct Suboxone for only 2 weeks and then taper off of the Suboxone during those 2 weeks. Otherwise, a person can taper the existing opiate while building up endorphins using the endorphin packs. If on methadone, the best cessation plan is to obtain a pain diagnosis and then be put on an equivalent of a short-acting opiate like oxycodone for 3 days. After those 3 days, they can then convert the Suboxone and taper off over a 2-week period. Dark chocolate also has an effect on endorphins. Chocolate contains phenolphthaleamine, also known as PEA. PEA is a brain chemical that is released when you feel like you're falling in love. PEA triggers the release of endorphins. There are also 2 alcoholic types that are associated with endorphin deficiency that we will cover near the end of this chapter. GABA pathway and benzodiazepines. GABA is the main inhibitory neurochemical of the central nervous system. GABA is the main counterbalance for the excitatory neurochemical called glutamate. When someone is low in GABA, they have a difficult time dampening stimulation and will tend to be anxious and may even demonstrate seizures. GABA is basically the brakes on the nervous system. We will demonstrate this on a synapse. When an excitatory impulse comes down the originating nerve, as usual, the synapse has the opportunity to ramp up the impulse or decrease it. If GABA is released, the impulse is lessened. Benzodiazepines are thought to do 2 things as sedatives. They make the synapse more permeable to GABA, so there is a much greater inhibitory effect. They also diminish the amount of calcium that can flow into synaptic areas. Calcium assists in muscle contraction, and having less calcium involved is part of why benzodiazepines act as a muscle relaxant. And of course, over time, we experience downregulation. The receptors become less receptive to GABA, and therefore it takes more and more of the drug to achieve the same effect. Then, when a person is coming off of the drug, they are getting less GABA, which will register as anxiety and typically gut issues. Additionally, the person coming off of opiates will get an influx of calcium ions, which will likely trigger muscle contractions. This is the likely mechanism behind seizures when the withdrawal is too rapid. Some people get put on a benzo because of a challenging or traumatic life situation. When the situation in life has passed, they taper the drug, go through withdrawal to varying degrees, and then get through it. Other people seem to suffer indefinitely once the drug is discontinued and get into a situation often termed protracted withdrawal. There is some theory around damaged benzoreceptors and that the person is experiencing ongoing suffering as these receptors go through the process of repair. This is a plausible and viable theory. But we, at Alternative to Meds, pose another possible mechanism. That is the role of toxicity. Some toxins act as excitotoxins, as seen in the grasshopper video. These types of toxins dysregulate the neurochemical balance, and then a person can become symptomatic. A person who is poisoned generally presents with a reasonably constant type of anxiety that does not generally come and go. It is like a background roar in the nervous system. An analogy might be a game of catch. If a pitcher throws a soft pitch, a person can catch it with their bare hand. This would be analogous to a normal interaction within the nervous system. If the pitcher pitches a 100 mile per hour fastball, very soon you are going to need a glove. The 100 mile per hour fastball is an excitotoxic nervous system, and the glove is a benzodiazepine. If a person is excitotoxic, then tapering the drug is like thinning the glove. At some point, the fastballs are going to start hurting. Our approach is to get the pitcher to pitch a slower ball by removing the excitotoxic burden. We are also feeding the nervous system what it needs for receptor repair in the event of damaged receptors. This approach is working very successfully in our population, and we have helped many people with protracted withdrawal in a much shorter time. Unfortunately, for some that have been tapering at home for a long duration and are suffering unreasonably, the best recommendation is to go back up to a stabilizing level on the benzo. This is often a difficult conversation to have with someone. The rationale is that if the person is so debilitated and sleepless that they cannot engage in the program, then they are not going to be able to experience true relief, as they are going to be unable to address the toxic burden. A person who has lowered the benzo to the point of pain and physical distress is often where we find people. They are sort of painted into a corner. Once they raise back up to a stabilizing dose and engage in the program, they get the benefit of unburdening themselves of neurotoxic burden. And when it comes time to eliminate the meds, they can do it at a much faster rate with far fewer complications. We have tried a lot of methods, including the Ashton method, which involves converting to Valium as it is longer acting and is technically easier to taper from. We have found in most cases that it is better to taper off of the med that the person is accustomed to. Remember, it will be easier after the toxic burden is lowered. You want to spread out the dosing so that the person is not experiencing interdosing withdrawal. For instance, if a person is taking Ativan at night, since Ativan has a short half-life, they may experience withdrawal during the morning or day. It is best to spread the medication out 2 or more times a day to avoid interdosing withdrawal. By anyone's standard, even a slow taper off of a benzo can be difficult. Usually, the withdrawal from a benzo medication cut begins on or about the second day and may last until the third to fifth day. And it is typically accompanied by anxiety, fear, insomnia, and gut issues. If the acute withdrawal lasts longer than this, there is likely underlying neurotoxic poisoning that needs to be cleared up. There is a bridge medication that is considered safe: gabapentin. Basically, gabapentin is the naturally occurring GABA attached to a pentane molecule. It is basically a prescription vitamin and is definitely a lesser evil than a benzo. Gabapentin does not use liver enzymes to be broken down, which means the body is not registering it as a toxin. It can give the person just enough of a buffer to endure the benzo withdrawal. Once the person withdraws from the benzo, the gabapentin can be tapered much easier. Gabapentin has a very short half-life in the body and needs to be taken throughout the day to support the withdrawal. Since it has such a short half-life, gabapentin is not effective at giving someone a full night's sleep. For sleep, a person may consider Vistaril, which is an antihistamine, or trazodone, which is an older tricyclic antidepressant. These meds are just for the purpose of softening the withdrawal and are lifted once the withdrawal is complete. The bridge medications are optional. A non-prescription activated GABA product that is effectually similar to gabapentin is called phenotropic, also called phenibut. It is used in a similar way as gabapentin. GABA pathway and benzodiazepines. Supplements: phenotropic 3 times per day, taurine 500 to 1,000 milligrams AM and PM, tryptophan 500 to 1,500 milligrams AM and PM, 100 milligrams of niacin, 200 milligrams theanine AM and PM. Toxic impairment: clear up neurotoxins, specifically pesticide and insecticides. Avoid diet sodas, aspartame, and any stimulants. Mercury can also often be implicated in these cases, as can other toxic metals. Diet: eat organic where possible. Consider a microbiome cleanse and bone broth if benzobelly is present. Environment: increase physical activity, specifically walking in a relaxed area. Try not to make big life decisions. During this time, a person is probably in fight or flight, and this will taint their perspective on life. We have successfully handled many 20-plus year benzo cases, and it has been a rewarding but often challenging journey. You can get through this. You just have to be strategic and go at your own pace and not take your current thoughts too seriously. They will pass. Consider bridging with gabapentin. When done correctly, this may be just the tool to round off the edge of this withdrawal and make it tolerable. Rapid detox for benzodiazepines is lunacy. We have unfortunately stopped working with folks who have just exited a rapid detox. It is not necessary to throw someone into crisis under the pretense that they are an addict. People coming into the center in that sort of crisis are basically unmanageable. We would much rather take someone on a stabilized medication level and do the tapering ourselves, as we will support them at a pace that they can handle. Alcohol. In all cases, it is important to get the addictive biochemistry of a situation. There are several types of alcoholics, which was first posed by Joan Matthews Larson and will be expanded upon here. Number 1, anxiety related. 2, hypoglycemic. 3, allergic addicted. And 4, endorphin deficient. It is important to know what kind of alcoholic a person is so that you can create a working strategy. Without knowledge of the addiction and correction of the underlying addictive biochemistry, a person often falls back into the same trap. Anxiety related. Most everyone who has a drinking problem has anxiety. The type of anxiety we are highlighting here involves a reasonably constant type of anxiety that does not come or go. This type of person is self-medicating to lessen anxiety so that they can function. We are not talking about the anxiety that comes up first thing in the morning or directly after their alcohol levels drop. We are talking about people that have anxiety for long periods of time, even when they are not drinking. These folks are probably plugged up with excitotoxins and need to address that underlying toxicity. Hypoglycemic. Alcohol is a liquid sugar. It does not even need to be digested, as the sugar alcohol passes straight from the stomach and into the bloodstream. If a person is experiencing low blood sugar, the craving is, of course, for sugar, and even more potently, alcohol. You can spot these folks often because without alcohol, they gravitate towards sugar and coffee, which is the same addictive biochemistry. The drinking pattern is usually a person who drinks coffee the first thing in the morning, and if they eat in the morning at all, it is likely sugar-based. Then, at some point in the afternoon, the blood sugar plummets and they drink. They often present as the all-day, everyday type of drinker that keeps a steady state alcohol level. Unfortunately, the AA programs support this addictive biochemistry by serving donuts and coffee at meetings. The philosophical aspects of AA are fabulous. The attention to the addictive biochemistry is not. To break this pattern, it is going to take several months of dedicated effort. A person should eat protein-based breakfast every morning and eat at least 3 times per day, avoiding sugar. Coffee should be avoided for the first several months, and if added, which is not recommended, should only be consumed after eating breakfast. The power of a blood sugar drop to create cravings for alcohol is a brain survival mechanism that will overpower even the best of them. The vast majority of persons who do not put attention to their diet white knuckle their recovery until they eventually relapse. If you want to break the hypoglycemic addiction to alcohol, you will break the addiction to sugar by addressing hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemic dispositions can occur in combination with any of the other dispositions, and any person suffering from alcohol should respect these basic tenets. Allergic addicted. When a person is allergic to alcohol, the inflammatory reaction releases endorphins and the person gets addicted to their own endorphins. You can spot this type of person because they have a very low alcohol tolerance before their mood turns. Any nationality can have this disposition, but it is more common in the Native American and Asian populations. Binge drinkers often fall into this category. The fix for this is the same recommendations given in the endorphin opiate section. Endorphin deficient, THIQ. Technically, the allergic addicted is an endorphin deficient disposition. What is unique about the THIQ disposition is the drinking pattern and the mechanism. THIQ is an opiate-like compound that is produced in small amounts during the breakdown of alcohol. But you have to drink a lot to get there. These folks have a fantastic liver and can convert alcohol extremely well. You can spot these folks as they are the ones that can drink ridiculous amounts of alcohol and still be standing. The THIQ, as an opiate, can lower the social anxiety, and these types of folks are generally the life of the party. Eventually, the party stops and the body breaks down and they find themselves stuck. The correction for this type of drinker is the same as those given in the endorphin opiate section. To address alcohol issues. Supplements. Address endorphin deficient issues as mentioned in the endorphin section. Add B vitamins, specifically B1, B2, B5, and niacin, as alcohol burns up B vitamins. You can take 500 milligrams of niacin every time there is a craving. Toxic impairment. Stop smoking if possible, as cigarettes are often cured with sugar. At least switch to American spirits, which are additive-free. Diet. Eliminate sugar and caffeine. Include protein-based foods. Follow the recommendations regarding hypoglycemia. This is the most important point to take in. Eat and/or drink water if there's a craving. Thirst and hunger are often confused with alcohol cravings. Environment. Get into a supportive community. That might be AA, church, yoga, or any other community a person is attracted to. It is not good to get lonely or bored in early recovery. Closing comments. If a person is low in one inhibitory neurochemical, then they are likely low in others, as other neurochemicals try to compensate. The same goes for excitatory ones. It is best to feed the entire spectrum of inhibitory when a person is too revved up. If a person is too flat, they may want to do the DLPA, tyrosine, and could even do some of the inhibitory protocols as well. You do not, however, want to do a stimulatory protocol with someone who is anxious or having any kind of delusions. The supplement recommendations here are very basic and mostly involve the precursors to the neurotransmitters being addressed. Alternative to Med Center uses many hundreds of different products tailored to individual situations. We keep it simple in this video for those who cannot come to the center and wish to bring this information to at-home doctors. Alternative to Med Center has a strong science component, but is ultimately a place of love and compassion. We find that a true caring environment with staff that can relate to the emotions a person is experiencing is where true healing begins. Really, how else can a person heal but in a place where they feel loved? Disclaimer. Much of what has been said in this video is outside of conventional wisdom. Largely, there is no conventional wisdom regarding medication withdrawal available. Therefore, we have postulated theories based upon our clinical observations and avail ourselves to change and deeper understandings as we collectively evolve our understanding. None of what has been said should be considered medical facts or medical recommendations, but rather practical guidelines, knowing that each person is an individual and responds uniquely to treatment. If you are considering any recommendations given in this video, consult with a medical professional who is actually present with you through your process. If you do not have such a doctor, you can find one in your area using the acam.org website. Thank you, and good luck in your journey.